Pending no last second changes, the beta is 1 day away, or actually less than that by the time this video goes up. And so there's a lot that we have scheduled here up on the channel for content wise. But before we jumped into anything, I wanted to share my thoughts, feedback, and opinions on some of the weapons that I think really will help you out having a great time playing, not only just in terms of performance wise, but also that you'll generally enjoy. With the beta tomorrow, there's more than likely going to be more than just the 19 weapons that we saw officially at the reveal for multiplayer of Modern Warfare, but probably not as many as the rumored 45 that we know and have seen elsewhere in either chatter or via things like Game Informer's exclusive coverage. But today I wanted to talk to you guys about 12 weapons that I think will be in the beta here and that you should definitely keep an eye out for. Weapons to consider, whether that be ones for starters or players that are seasoned veterans. Today I want to share the thoughts in my mind and let you know what weapons you should be looking forward to once you can finally get your hands on the controller and jump into a game. Now naturally we need to lay out some ground rules and parameters for this video. Of all the weapons that you just saw listed on screen here for you guys, those 45 of them, again, not every single one will be playable, and from first-hand experience, I've played with about 19 of them. So can I give an accurate depiction of every single one of these with 100% certain guarantee? Absolutely not. But thought I'd provide the feedback that can help you prepare for what you'll end up encountering or possibly not encountering in the beta, depending again on how levels may work. Additionally, we're not going to be running through all the weapons, just about 12 that stand out to me, as there's weapons that again can work for a first-time player or seasoned veteran and can allow you to perform at an optimal standard or allow you to have the best experience from a game perspective of trying to be an all-around player, meaning you can end up getting kill streaks, you'll end up being able to play the objective, and you'll be able to hold power positions and so on. And the final thing to bear in mind is this is just my own personal list. What I say you don't have to take as 100% gospel. I encourage you actually to try other weapons outside of this list because it's the beta. It's not like anything is going to be transferring over to the full year, so if you care about that KD, that score per minute, anything else statistic-wise, it won't matter. Just have fun with it. I wanted to share some recommendations for weapons that I think you can do well with at any level, but take it all with a pinch of salt. Bear in mind, again, it is my own personal list here, and I'm just hoping to pass along some knowledge that I have onto you. But anyways, let's start out with the rifles and what I think are the basic starters for rifles, the M13 and the M4A1. By the basic setup of what we've seen in the menus thus far, these layouts of what are traditionally the first unlocks could potentially change for the beta and the full game, but based off what we know, the M13 looks to be the most basic of your standard rifles. Outside of default classes, this may be your first one you unlock, or maybe it is unlocked by default, so that whenever you can create your own class, you can jump in and take advantage of it. Now, this is a very basic yet decent starter weapon. As with all the weapons and loadouts, once you custom tailor your attachments in the gunsmith and what you add via perks to your loadout, it may feel way more fluent to complement your playstyle and your gunplay a little bit better, but at its core, the weapon is solid. It has a higher fire rate and a lower recoil, making it a decent starting weapon. But as a result, while not necessarily having enough data to back it up entirely after not having much time to sit down and test every single shot, every value that comes with it, the natural trade-off that we've seen year over year is that those two things, when combined, usually the damage is what is dropped to mitigate what would be a more powerful weapon. So you can fire your shots off faster with relative accuracy, but you also won't be doing as much damage. So to trade off, you'll have to try and gauge for yourself, and it's also important to be conscious of that ammo count as well with that upped fire rate. Ultimately though, overall, I'd say it's a great starter weapon, and when ranked up with attachments, it can definitely go toe-to-toe with some of the statistically better weapons, similar to how the ICR is in Black Ops 4. Basic, but effective with the right loadout and in the right hands. Next up, let's talk about the M4A1, another entry-level and basic rifle here with this one that can do very well. Very similar to the M13 in regard for how it handles, but with a little bit more kick. It has a little slower of a fire rate and what seems like a tad more damage. Built into this weapon's description is that if you can control your shots, the weapon can be effective at range, and this is 100% true. I was single tapping this at a distance when I was playing at the reveal event and playing 5-flag domination on a Nia Palace in 20v20, and it holds its own at a longer range. Naturally, long range isn't what you'd want to use this for a standard rifle, but it can keep its own in a gunfight at range if it needs to. But especially in mid-range where it specializes, it's absolutely fantastic. This, as a result, makes it a very standard weapon, and that's something that has been in the past as well, but with it being presumably a bit more of a basic unlock and one of the ones you get first and out of the way immediately, you may or may not encounter this first thing in the beta or shortly thereafter first thing. It's still one that is relatively easy to master and versatile in almost all situations. This, for what it's worth, was one of my go-to weapons within the reveal build of the game, and I'm excited to mess around with it again in the beta with much more time to work with it. Now, talking about the other weapons rifle-wise, because we're kind of just finishing out the category because I love the rifles. Currently, with no knowledge of how the unlocks will work, the higher tier ones I think come down to the final three with what we saw at the reveal build. The FR556, aka the FAMAS, the AK-47, and the Odin. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these are unobtainable, and maybe some of those rumored weapons are unlocked and usable before these ones, but simply from first-hand experience, let's discuss. In the level from best to worst, it's a tough one, but I think that we'd say the Odin is probably the best of these rifles. The Odin is quite a character of a weapon. Naturally, it's full auto, it has a slower fire rate, high damage profile, and has quite a bit of kick. That's the balancing act that we've mentioned and referenced with the M13, but in almost the exact opposite side of the spectrum. You'll burn through your ammo and have a hell of a time controlling this thing at range because of that recoil, but if you can land those shots, it's brilliant. But truth be told, I almost exclusively avoided the Odin in full auto mode because thanks to the built-in select fire on some weaponry, most, not all of the weapons that are full auto in this game have a select fire option, you could change this from auto to semi-auto. And if you know the basics of gun mechanics in gaming, single fire tapping is almost always better than holding down the trigger for not only accuracy, but also control of that weapon. With the damage profile of the Odin, you only need 2 to 3 shots to land to secure the kill, meaning that if you trust your shots and your ability to react in unison with that center speed of the weapon, it's like the MW2 FAL in terms of power, precision, and recoil control. Meaning it's basically a laser pointer. I can't say that from my personal experience you can modify it in the gunsmith in your loadout to act the exact same way as a modded controller did back in the day, but damage and TTK wise, this thing 100% should be on your to watch list. As for the next one, it's probably the FR556 because it can pack a punch. If I'm not mistaken, the default FR556 comes equipped with 30 rounds in a mag and 60 rounds in your reserves, giving you 30 bursts total before you expend your ammunition. Now, that's decent, but not necessarily amazing for a player who likes to stay alive on high streaks and doesn't necessarily want to run scavenger. But the nice part is the counter to that fact is that the chest and up, landing those shots, it's a 1 burst every time, which makes it tremendously dangerous. From playing around with it on the 2v2 alpha quite a bit, it seemed like this still applied from across the map, which granted 2v2 map scaling is nothing compared to the length of say 10v10, 20v20, or even a 32v32 map, but the range holds up as it's a viable option. And again, with those right attachments, you can almost entirely mitigate the recoil from this, as well as make this a great weapon for burst fire enthusiasts. So definitely keep an eye out for that one as well. And the final rifle we'll talk about here, and of course rounding out that rifle category, but being that I loved all the rifles, sorry about that, bias showing, is the AK-47. Truth be told, I think this is a great choice, and I had a ton of fun with it back at the reveal event, and even sometimes whenever it would pop up in the 2v2. But out of the better rifles that we discussed here, I put it at 3 of 3 outside of that, just because the other two have unique features that just make them so much harder to put anything above them. But the AK is still a great choice. It's a more powerful version of those M13s and the M4s that we discussed, meaning you can still easily jump in with this weapon and absolutely shred without really any prior experience with it. And one of the cool things is how versatile this thing is as well. You can equip things like your round drum to give you 75 rounds per drum, meaning you'll rarely need to reload, and you can also change the weapon into things like the AK-74U or even the RPK with absolute ease. So it's a middle ground between the high-powered and the starting rifles, but it's definitely one I would recommend. Now, I'm really hoping we end up seeing the Scar H and the FAL. I would love to see that in the beta, but if not, maybe just we'll see that in the full game. But really, I don't remember exactly how I felt about the Scar H. The FAL wasn't in the build all the way back in May whenever we played it behind closed doors, but those are ones that I don't necessarily want to say keep an eye out for, but also keep an eye out for to experience for the first time. As for SMGs, that's the next category we'll talk about. There's 3 in particular here, the MP5, the MP7, and the AUG, that yes, fill out all of what we saw so far, but I have some more to say about some weapons than others. The MP5, let's start there. That is probably, again, in comparison to our starting weapons, like we talked about the M13 and the M4, the MP5 is that starting weapon for SMGs. It's very base level, entry level, however you want to put it, but it's something that can definitely perform. It's very good for those that are mobile players that like to be up in the face of enemy players. The damage isn't the best out of all of the SMGs, but it is still one that can get the job done. As with all other weapons and all other SMGs in particular, the more headshots you land, the better, because SMGs naturally have less damage than that of the rifles. So following up, I can't exactly say that you'll shred through people with this when we just talked about things like the Odin doing 2-hit kills depending on where you end up landing your shots, but the MP5 is a great one that is mobile, versatile, and can get the job done at probably a base unlocked perspective. It might be one of those default weapons that are unlocked as soon as you unlock create a class. Maybe at level 5, we'll end up having to see how that plays out, but it's one to definitely keep your eye out for if you're a starter here with this one. The MP7, the classic, of course, is going to be one players want to keep an eye out for because not only is the fire rate fantastic in this here, not only can you end up modifying it in the gunsmith to end up having more ammunition to keep you from running out as quickly as you would. But if you can control the recoil on this thing, it's actually got a decent range for an MP7 and an SMG that you might not necessarily consider. Granted, back in the MW3 days, the MP7 was a laser pointer at almost any range. You could range people across the map, but for not only nostalgia purposes, but also just to be able to run through your enemies in a run and gun situation, the MP7 is one of the better choices out there. I don't necessarily think this will be a default or maybe even close to base level unlock. I would imagine this is probably in the beta, maybe say something of say rank 15 or so is my guess. And same thing goes with the AUG a little bit later. That might not even come depending on how we end up, again, seeing the ranking for everything work out and what level you have to hit before that. Even if you can't experience this in weekend 1, keep your eye open for weekend 2 because it's definitely worth playing around with. Next up, the final one of the SMGs that I want to talk about, the AUG. That's one that, for those of you guys in the 2v2 alpha that played around with this, you might actually have enough experience with this as well because it was duoed with an AX50 class setup. It was an overkill setup of the sniper and the SMG. And truth be told, I felt like such a scumbag doing it, but I often immediately switched to that secondary and just rushed the snipers, trying to get a hold of those sniper shots in the 2v2 alpha, and I'd clean house doing that. But the AUG seemed to have a middle of the pack fire rate, but a little bit higher of a damage. And even though the recoil could get a little bit wild at times if you had just held down that trigger, comparably, you could see why it was preliminarily ranked as a further progressional unlock compared to the MP7 or the MP5. So keep an eye out for that one as well. And again, in the same vein as the Scar H and the FAL, the P90 was something that I did play with back in May. I remember liking it a lot, but we don't know if that's going to be something that is visible in the beta, if it's going to be something that is close to the unlock levels that we'll be able to hit. So we'll have to keep a general perspective eye out for that one as well for a more first-hand experience, rather than recommending it as a weapon that you can absolutely shred with or something like that. Now, we're kind of rounding down to other weapons that are more so outside of my comfort zone, but that are absolutely fantastic. But as a result, we don't have as many left. We have 4 more weapons we want to talk about. The first of that being the M14, which I really don't have much to say on. I didn't like it in the way that it was presented within the 2v2 alpha because you couldn't put any optics on it, and it was that base iron sight. And the way the mobility here works with this one plus the iron sights just threw me for a trip. But the one thing that I will say is that, if I'm not mistaken, it was at the reveal event and also then the 2v2 alpha, a one shot to the head. So if you're precise, well, naturally that's something you want to keep an eye out for and want to try around for yourself. So bear that in mind. The next one, though, that I really did love was the MK2. It's a lever action marksman rifle with only 6 shots available before you have to reload and 12 in reserve, but it's something that if you're accurate, again, you can make use of that. It does have the potential to one-hit kill, but primarily if you're hitting the lower torso or the extremities, it's something that will more than likely take 2 shots. But again, as a marksman rifle, it still does have a nice damage output, and it does have a lot of mobility for one of those marksman rifles. It's not necessarily something you can spam like the M14s, but it's still a tremendous amount of fun to play around with and can definitely pack a punch. If you're looking to try out something outside of just your standard SMGs and your rifles, this would be one of my go-tos. Now, the final 2 weapons come down to 2 completely different playstyles, but you can actually use them together. One of those, firstly, being the AX50 sniper. This is the only sniper we had available to get our hands on during all the pre-release states up until this point. That behind closed doors press event, that reveal event for multiplayer, and of course the 2v2 alpha. But the AX50 is one that it very much so feels like, in my mind, the MSR from Modern Warfare 3. It's one of the traditional feeling snipers and one that I think will feel right at home for players that get to play around with it. Now, unlike the alpha where you couldn't tweak the attachments to make it something that scopes in faster, the beta will offer the option to do that. With the attachments available in the gunsmith, you can change how this at its base performs. So that's something that will definitely be worthwhile, and if you're a sniper, you want to play around with this one and get the hang of it. And the final weapon that I really want to recommend, and I definitely want you guys to try out, is probably one of my favorite weapons in all of Modern Warfare so far, and that sounds weird, but it's the 50GS or the Desert Eagle. Now, I say this because it's a precise weapon. To be good with it, you need to have good aim. You need to be able to tap players, and the beautiful part is that if you play CSGO where this was popularized, you can 1-dig with this thing, meaning you can pop someone in the head and it's a one-shot kill almost at any range. I haven't obviously tried it on the larger maps like 20v20 or 32v32, but you can cross-map one-shot people with this and say 2v2, and so therefore you have a very good chance of getting a one-shot if you're accurate with it. But other than that, it's more than likely a 2-3 shot depending on where you hit them. A lot of the times you can just single tap and you can secure the second shot being that kill. But it to me is one of the most fun weapons to play around with, and also one that packs the most damage for especially a pistol. So I'm incredibly excited, probably more so than anything else, to get my hands on the 50GS or Desert Eagle once again. But that's going to conclude the weapons that I think you should look out for here within the Modern Warfare beta. So again, as with all these, I don't exactly know how the ranking will work out, if all these are accessible, if there's going to be some that are cut off, or maybe they all are, who knows. But I wanted to give you guys, at least from my own firsthand experience before I jump into the beta as of tomorrow and get these festivities kicking off for the next 2 weeks or so of content, I wanted to give you guys my opinions, my thoughts, and my recommendations for weapons that I think you can absolutely destroy with. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is there anything in particular that you guys would like to see here out of the upcoming Modern Warfare content? Is there any weapon you're excited to jump in and get your hands on again, either that you experienced in the alpha or something you maybe didn't but saw on the reveal builds? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below, and of course if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare beta and even further into the launch. We got you covered. I am so excited to play this here again. So hit the subscribe button if you guys are interested in any of that content. If you guys want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best place to get content outside of YouTube. Probably can live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, wherever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. But let's end out of the way. Thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.